Yes, your father and I dated for about, say, 7 or 8 months, and I was at work. It was around October. It was a cool night. He picked me up in his truck, and he looked at me and he said he had to ask me a question. And he asked me if I'd marry him, and I said yes. And then he gave me a ring we had both been looking at a week before, and it was a pearl ring with 2 pearls and 2 diamonds set in gold. And that was how we got engaged. And then we got married well, that would have happened when I was younger, when I worked for your grandfather, and I had gotten my motorcycle license before they made the law that you had to have a driver's license before you could get a motorcycle license, a vehicle license. I slid in just before the law went through, so I didn't have my automobile license. I just had the motorcycle license. And we were coming back from work, and there's what used to be a particular spot in Rumney where they put a passing zone, but it wasn't a particularly good place to pass, and your grandfather was irritated with the car in front of us, and he wanted me to pass the car. And finally, I got mad enough that I did it. And after I pulled in, I did it within the zone. There was a cop coming the other way, and he decided to stop me. And I refused to talk to him. I put my window up, locked my door, and didn't say anything, which forced your grandfather, who was the reason I passed the car anyway, to have to get out and talk to the police in order to get us off. We didn't get a ticket or anything. I didn't lose the license I held, and I was able to get my automobile license years later.
Responsibility.
The responsibility is that when you're driving, you don't listen to whoever is in the passenger seat.
What's your favorite experience with a car?
Driving to the top of Mount Washington in the White Mountains and then driving down.
What's your favorite car you ever owned?
I can't remember the year, but I think it was a 1968 Oldsmobile Cutlass Rocket with a 400 engine. It was a muscle car, dark green with mag wheels, and it was fast. When I was 21 years old, I was in a head-on car accident with another car. Another car actually rolled over, and fortunately nobody was hurt. That was my worst accident. The cars are smaller now, and they're much safer. The seat belts are much better than what I had when I was a kid. And the other cars were pretty much gas guzzlers, and they weren't economical. One of my friends when I was a teenager actually was on a motorcycle, and he actually got killed. He got hit by another car, and he was actually drinking. That was the cause of the accident.
How old were you when you got your first car?
I was 21. I just graduated college, and I had a job at FedEx, and I bought a brown Toyota Celica, and I was cool. I have 2 memorable moments that involve a garage door. One, I was living with a bunch of people, and we were one of our roommates were switching cars around at night, and they put my car, which was a truck, a stick truck, a manual truck, in front of the garage door. And when I went out in the morning to go to work and I started the car, I never leave the car in gear, but this person did leave the car in gear. So when I turned the key, the truck just hopped right through the garage door.
Ooh.
And the other one involving a garage was I had gone for a bike ride, and I put my bike on top of the car then, not on the back. And I came home, I went for the bike ride, and I came home, and I was backing the car into the garage, and I forgot that I had the bike on top. So I backed it into the garage and ripped the seat off the top. I think that's all that happened then.
Bad luck with garage doors.
Yep. And I have a cat story. I was taking a cat to the vet, and
Oh boy.
you know how you have those little carriers? Well, I felt really bad because the cat was meow, 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 meowing, so I let the cat out of the carrier,
Ooh.
and he, Clyde, crawled up on the dashboard of the car, and he pooped.
Oh.
It was horrible all the way to the vet. But then we had a poop sample. I think that's it.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, the first night that I got to see my father's car, this was in 1964, back in the old days, back in the last century. I had my license, and my father said I could use the car that night. Well, I could go and take my girlfriend out, and we stayed out until about 1 or 2 in the morning. I was supposed to be home at 1, and then I decided to see how fast the car would go coming home. And I was going through Gorham, downtown Gorham, at about 2:30 in the morning, doing about 90 miles an hour. And I got picked up by a state trooper. Somehow, I was able to hide it from my parents until after I was married, and they got a letter sent from the state to their house, and I was no longer living there, and they wondered what that was all about, and they brought it to the house, and I'd kind of forgotten about it, and I sat down, opened it up, and I went, gulp, and they said, what's that about? And I go, well, Dad, it seems like I was speeding in your car last year, and now they've taken some points off my license. He goes, what? I didn't know anything about that. I go, well, I started to of hiding it from you, but now I've been caught. So I lost a bunch of points on my license. And in that day, too, your insurance would go up if you got picked up in age. So my insurance went sky high. So, but still, that didn't bother me. For years, I was always having my foot in the gas pedal, and I paid for it. So about the middle 80s, I decided it was getting so expensive for my insurance that maybe I ought to start slowing down. So I did. But I've always loved cars. You know, I just figure that they're a source of fun, but you can get in trouble in a hurry with them too. So, you know, you just kind of have to use your head when you Eric, how you keep your boat. Well, that's how I like to keep my cars too. So I like to keep them clean and try to keep them under 100. Have a good time, and just watch out for cops, because there's a lot more people on the roads today than there were back then. Everybody knows everything, and technology has made it so they know about everybody's car and where they are and how fast they're going, and so it's not worth it. The insurance today is so high, and so I just try to be good. But every once in a while, you know, I act up, get away with it. So I guess the responsibility I'm saying is if you're using your father's car, you know, don't get picked up, because they'll find out about it eventually.
What was the first car you've ever owned?
The first car I ever owned was a Plymouth Volare Duster, a 1979 blue Volare Duster.
How old were you when you first got in your first accident, and how?
I believe I was 18 years of age. I was driving on Route 128 around Boston. It was snowing, and my rear caliper on my brake locked up, and I spun into the guardrail in the middle of the highway. Luckily, no one was in front of me or behind me.
What's one funny story you remember about driving?
One funny story? Actually, it's not very funny, but I remember trying to drive to Logan Airport as an inexperienced driver, and I remember seeing everyone else flying past me and weaving in and out of lanes without using directionals on their way to the airport, and I couldn't help think what crazy drivers there were in and around Boston.
Do you ever remember going on a road trip with your friends?
Yes, I do. And we went to Hampton Beach and got sunburnt.
What responsibility have you learned from driving?
I've also learned that a car is very expensive and needs a lot of maintenance.
What were cars like when you were little?
They were boxy in shape. They didn't have smooth lines. And they were square and large.
What was your family car like?
We had two of them. One was a station wagon with a seat in the back, and the other one was a big, boxy, square car, black.
What was your first car like?
It was a 71 Monte Carlo, Chevy Monte Carlo, and the interior was cloth, and it had a leak in the roof, so it kind of smelled funky.
What was your craziest car experience?
I had a Buick Regal, and I was driving down the street, and I lost my brakes, and I was driving down a hill, and I had to pull on the emergency brake. That's pretty much my... Oh, my craziest one was driving with my friend onto the ice of the lake. We went out on the lake in the car. That's probably my craziest one.
That's boring.
Driving on the lake
I was
in
kidding.
a car?
I was kidding.
That was pretty crazy.
How much did gas cost?
I remember it being 69 cents.
And did you ever drive underage?
No.
Like on your land or anything?
No. We didn't have any money. I never drove underage.
Okay, so what was the first car you ever got? And how old were you?
I was 17, and it was a Chevy Cavalier, Type 10.
What new responsibilities did you have once you got your new car?
Mostly financial, which were I had to pay for insurance, pay for gas, pay for maintenance, and pay for registration, and that's about it.
And what about the worst thing that ever happened?
The worst thing that ever happened was getting into an accident. Not a bad one. I was driving with my friends, and I was swerving back and forth on a dirt road, and I lost control, and I slammed into a ditch. Nobody was hurt.
Was that some memorable moments that you had?
Was that some memorable moments? No, yeah, well, yeah, I remember it. Don't know if I'd call it memorable.
Do you have any exciting things that ever happened with cars?
Yeah.
Like?
Well, just being with my friends and riding around and having the freedom to come and go as you please. Those were the memorable moments.
Alright, is that
being
it?
able to drive to school, drive to work.
Is that it? Do you have any stories?
Do I have any stories?
Or anything about cars?
Do I have any stories or anything about cars? Cars are cool.
Alright, is that all you have?
I guess that's about all I have, yeah. How long did it go? Huh?
Okay.
The cheeseburger, Kelly's grandmother, and I was in an accident 20 years ago with my I was in an accident about 3 years ago with my 3 kids, and I was going food shopping, and my son was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 then, and he wanted to go back home to be with his father. So I turned around. Yes, there was a car coming on the bridge in front of me, and I got scared.
Mhm. Okay.
Dickie's Burger, Kelly's grandmother, and I was in an accident. Well, make sure before you turn that you get plenty of time. Before you make your U-turn, make sure there's plenty of time.
Yeah.
If your car coming, make sure you get plenty of time to turn before the car hits you.
Mhm. This is my mom, Cindy Young, age 43. What was your very first car?
My first car was a Volkswagen Rabbit.
Do you have a lesson in responsibility that you've learned from driving that car?
Actually, I got my first car when I was in college, and I was going to Keene State at the time, and I was leaving for a weekend to go to UNH. So I was driving over to UNH, and I dropped something by my feet. I don't remember what it was, a cassette or something. So I bent down to pick it up, not even thinking that I took my eyes off the road for a second, and all of a sudden I'm in the guardrails on the side of the road and wiped out the passenger side of that car. So because I was like horrified that my parents were going to be mad, I ended up turning around, going back to my parents to show them what I did, and ended up, obviously it cost money to fix the car just from one stupid mistake of taking my eyes off the road just for a second.
What have you learned from that?
Just that, even though you think, I'm just going to tune the radio or I'm just going to pick something up that I dropped, it's like you never know. I mean, I could have hit, another car or something else, and it could have been way worse than it was. So I learned that driving's, a big responsibility, and it's not to be taken lightly.
Do you think what happened made you a better driver today?
Yes, because what happened when I was, 18 years old or whatever, scared me enough that you just learn your lesson, but you learn it the hard way.
Do you think your age had something to do with it?
Yeah, just because I was, a teenager, and it was my first car, and it definitely had something to do with it, because as you get older and you learn more and you take things more seriously, and, you just become more aware of what's around you, and you become a better driver, and so yes, my age had something to do with it.
I am Miles People, Block A, 8th grade Social Studies. I'm here with Tim Farrell, age 39. Tim, how many years have you been driving?
23.
Cool. Have you had any bad experiences while driving?
If you mean car accidents, I've had a few, none that I was responsible for. One day when I was leaving work, I was a passenger in a vehicle. I was reading the newspaper on the way home from work, discussing the sports page with a friend that I work with. We pulled out of an intersection to take a left-hand turn at a four-way stop sign. A person coming from our right ran his red light, smashed into us from behind, pushed us into the car in front of us. At that point, my head hit the windshield. When we hit the car in front of us, it twisted me back in my seat, and I ended up with a terrible case of whiplash, and I've had nothing but trouble with my back ever since.
I'm sorry to hear that. At that time, what were you doing for a job?
I was actually a professional soccer player. I was in the off-season. I was training. I was getting ready to continue my professional soccer career.
So in what ways has your back pain affected your life throughout the last 14 years?
Well, it's basically made it difficult to do anything. I obviously keep a job and maintain a roof over my head, but it's difficult to do anything extra in addition to my everyday job. I usually come home with back pain and ice or heat and end up wanting to rest for most of my free time as opposed to do something that I might enjoy.
All because some idiot ran a red light.
Accidents happen. That's why they call them accidents.
What's your age, name, and occupation?
My name's Ed Mullen. I'm 45 years old, and I'm a Vice President of Sales and Marketing.
responsibility?
I have, actually.
Do you mind sharing that with me?
No, not at all. When I was 15 or 16, I'm not sure if I was driving yet, a buddy of mine bought a Willys Jeep from a government auction. They were selling them in the crates. So he bought this Jeep, came in a crate, bought it for $50, and that night we decided to take it and show it off at a local hangout where all the teens hang out. And, you know, I grew up in the South where we do a lot of four-wheeling and stuff, and we decided we were going to take it out and see what it would do, you know, like good old teenagers would do. And it only had 2 seats. So we put a girl wanted to go riding with us. A bunch of us were going to follow us out there, and a girl wanted to ride with us. So we said okay. So we put a milk crate in the back, and Billy had put a roll bar in it. So she was holding onto the roll bar, sitting on the milk crate. And we're driving out to the place we go four wheeling, and there was a sharp curve. It's kind of a slow curve, but we went around it a little bit too fast. And the girl sitting on a milk crate, not having seat belts or anything. You know, we knew she shouldn't have been there because there was no safety equipment, no seat belts, not even a seat, you know. And she slid off the milk crate and slipped off her hand slipped off the roll bar, and she fell across Billy's lap. He was driving, pinned his arms down, and we didn't make the turn. We went into the orange grove and crashed into a tree, and she flew out because she wasn't seat belted in, landed in a tree, and she died 3 days later.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. The lesson I think we learned from that is that cars and vehicles and trucks are not toys, even though you want to have a lot of fun with them. They're transportation, and they're very dangerous, and they can kill and hurt people. And if we learn that you shouldn't, if there's not the proper equipment, whether it be seats or safety belts, you shouldn't try to overload a vehicle for more than the amount of passengers that it was equipped for. And again, I guess the biggest thing we learned out of that is they're not a toy. You need to take deep responsibility for them and treat them like they're dangerous.
Thank you.
Was a 1973 Chevy Nova SS, green with white stripes on the side, and my mother co-signed so I could buy it. I think it was $3,200. I traded that car in 1 year later. It was a bad move on my part for a Triumph TR6. It was in 1972. I bought it down in South Carolina because I used to give the captain a ride over to get his car fixed, so I got friendly with the dealer. So I bought this car, and it was a disaster. It was a lemon. The windows didn't work. The horn would go off. The lights would go on, then they wouldn't go on. I had problems with the brakes and the shifting, and wouldn't go into third gear, and I had to go from second to fourth. I finally got rid of it. I was able to dish it off to somebody else, and then I got another one. And then I went a couple of years without a car because of that bad experience. I learned an experience. I thought that when I went to the showroom and saw that fancy car, that was going to be a wonderful deal, but I was young and foolish, and I shouldn't have listened to the dealer. He tricked me into buy this car that he couldn't get rid of, and I was the sucker. And there's one born every minute. Yeah, you got to shop around. Just don't look and see the pretty car there, walk in and buy the first one on the shelf. Get someone that knows something about automobiles when you go. Like when my brother Ted bought his first car, he went with his friend's dad, who was a mechanic, and he kept telling the salesman that he was not going to pay the price. He just refused, and the guy said, well, you can't get the car. And he says, I'm going to get the car, all right, because I'll go see the general manager, because I know what I'm talking about, and you're trying to sell this thing for too high a price. And the general manager came out and said, okay, sir, you drive a hard bargain, and the car is yours. So my brother Ted, he always goes like 5 years before he buys another car, and he always makes sure he brings a mechanic when he goes.
What is your name and age?
I'm John Zolnay, and I'm 43 years old.
Okay. What is a lesson of responsibility you've learned from driving a car?
There are two things that I'd like to say are very important. The first lesson, always look where you're going. And the second lesson is wear your seatbelt.
Okay. Can you describe your first car?
My first car was my dad's car. It was a Buick LeSabre, and it was maroon. He let me drive.
But did it get good mileage?
No, it was a big car.
What did it look like?
Luxury car, like very plush.
Was it like a truck?
No, it was a big 4-door car.
Okay. Do you have a good story about a car?
I do, as a matter of fact. When I first got my license, I had a little run-in with the law, or run into the law. I was, I was probably 16, and my dad asked me to go pick up my grandmother. And instead of going right to Grandma's house, I decided I was going to swing by this girl's house that I knew. And as I was driving by her house, I honked, and she was right in her window, and she leaned out, and she was waving to me, and I wasn't looking where I was going. And coming the other way was one of the police cars from my town. And he was a friend of their family, so I don't think he was looking either, but we weren't going all that fast. We were probably going about 10 miles an hour each. But I crashed straight head-on into him, and I was pretty surprised. I jumped out of the car, and, I thought, everything was my fault, and he was going to let it all go that way, and I don't know, it was just a big disaster because, of course, my dad was not happy about me crashing his car or any part of that. But the town newspaper really did the best for me, which was to come out, take a picture of the accident, and put in the story in their town paper on the front of the paper that came out on Thursday. It said, "Crush causes crash."
That's embarrassing. Okay, thank you very much, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, what is your name and
What kind of car do you drive?
I drive a Volkswagen Jetta. I've only had it 3 months.
How many cars do you have in your life?
And I had a Galaxy 500. I had a Gran Torino. I had a Pinto. I had 2 Tauruses, a Fairmont wagon, a Sable, and
teenager, how did you get your first car?
I paid $100 from I worked at a stationery store, and the guy that owned the store was selling his car for $100. It was a Ford Falcon. I forgot about that car.
What do you wish you did different when you got your license?
I wish nothing.
You don't wish to change anything?
Well, probably the first time that I ventured out with my father's car, I went on a senseless errand. I really didn't need to do that. I went to the store and I bought a Slurpee, and I put it on the dashboard, and then when I went to turn a corner, I kind of let go of the steering wheel and went to grab the Slurpee and crashed into a car. So I regret that. That was before they had cup holders.
That's a long time ago. What was your worst car experience?
When I was on my way after graduation up to a graduation party up north, and the whole radiator went on the Ford Falcon that I had, so I just kind of left it on the side of the road because I didn't want to miss the party.
Wow. What is your best car experience?
My best car experience was I don't have a best car experience. I just think of a car as transportation.
What sense of responsibility did you get from driving? Or do you get from driving?
I like to be in control, and if I'm the driver, then I can control what time I leave, what time I come home. So I like that. It's control.
Okay, thank you for your time.
You're very
I am going to be interviewing my mom, Joyce Pelletier, who's 57 years old. What year did you get your license in?
Got my license in the winter of 1969.
What was the first car you drove when you got your license?
A 1939 Chevy sedan.
Who taught you to drive?
My mother taught me to drive.
What was the first thing about responsibility she taught you while driving on the road?
She taught me to always stay focused on my driving, to be aware of other cars, and be respectful of other drivers. At the time, there was a lot of snow on the ground. We had a lot of snowstorms, so you had to yield to people trying to come down narrow pathways in the road. And also, driving an older car, you had to be careful of people coming up hills because the older cars sometimes had a hard time getting.
How did driving a car change your life?
It gave me my independence. It allowed me to get myself to my own swim team practice and to work in the summer.
Have you ever been pulled over for breaking a rule on the road?
Yes, I got pulled over for going too fast. I was given a warning.
Did that teach you a lesson or make you change your way of driving?
It taught me to be a little bit more aware of my speed and what was going on in the car.
Have you ever gotten into a car accident? And if so, how many?
In my lifetime, I've gotten into 4 or 5 car accidents.
Whose fault were the accidents?
Most of them were the fault of the other driver. One time I did skid and hit a couple of mailboxes on my own.
How old were you when you first got into an accident?
My first accident, I was 21 years old. A car was backing out of his driveway, backed into the street. The car coming at me swerved to miss him and hit me.
Did it change your way of driving, or did it teach you something?
It probably only taught me to be a little bit more aware of cars around me on the road.
Were any of your accidents serious?
No, not really. We did have one accident where a car came through a stop sign and we broadsided him. Fortunately for him, this midway point in his car, he suffered a broken arm and a concussion.
I think the lesson to learn from this interview is to be a focused driver and always be aware of others on the road. Also to be respectful of others on the road. Also, I think I learned that we should be appreciative of the modern cars, how much easier they are to use and manage.